Let's go now to the Atlantic Division. We'll just work our way from top to bottom. And the Claude Giroux, Frank. So at the end of it, let's start with Florida. Is it Giroux or bust for the Panthers, or do they have a second plan if they somehow don't land Giroux?
They might nibble around the edges. I don't think so. I mean, the number of people that think that this deal is cooked is really kind of amazing. I don't know if you saw a tweet from an account, Nasty Knuckles. That's the Flyers' former equipment manager and another former Flyers player, Riley Cote. Like they said, Claude Giroux's heading to the Panthers. They would have intimate, detailed connections. I don't know. I don't. The big question is, what's the return? The Panthers don't have a first round pick until 2024. That's really what sets them apart from Colorado. Mackie Samoskevich, their first round pick last year, fine. Good player at Michigan. I think everyone universally thinks he's a good player. Would you be enthused by Owen Tippett?
Yeah, he hasn't
94 NHL games.
Yeah, he hasn't had it. He hasn't done anything yet at the NHL level. But you know how you mentioned they don't have a pick now. If I was a team acquiring him, I'd rather take the first round pick from 2021 because that's 2 years ahead, right? On average of where this pick would be in the development for your team. So it kind of speeds things up. I actually would think that might have more value to me now than a 2022 pick. And while 2023 is a little different, a lot of scouts. I talked to another scout last night who thinks the 2023 draft in the first round, top to bottom, is going to be significantly better. So I could see why, if Colorado can dangle the 2023, then maybe a team's patient. But if you're a GM, Frank, and you're the team acquiring him, we all know that you're probably on thinner ice, right? And unless you've got an ownership group that's going to be ultra patient. Mm-hmm. Right? Because usually it's the bad teams right now that are acquiring these first round picks.
Yeah. And I don't know that Samoskevich is all that far off from really being a contributor. What do you think about the price that they paid for Sherratt? We've talked a lot about it being high. Do you like the stylistic fit?
Oh, I've been saying it all year long. I thought Florida 3 months ago, we said that the defense is what they need, because what Ben Sherratt can allow them to do, Frank, is it could allow them to split up Ekblad and Weegar and put Weegar back on his natural side. And now you've got Ben Sherratt, and Ben Sherratt played top 4 minutes last year in Montreal in the postseason. He's the exact type of defenseman you want. And if you pair him with either Ekblad or Weegar, they're the puck moving guys. Sherratt can move the puck decently well.
But would you break up Weegar and Ekblad, though? That's the question. Maybe you can do it situationally where you keep them together for chunks of the game and then separate them.
I think Ben Sherratt's that solid of a defender that you could. I think the reason they did it before was they're like, this pairing's so good, we'll just keep it. They're our number one pair by far. But now we can divvy up our minutes and make two pairs that are better combined than what they had now, which was one really dominant pair, and then there was a significant drop. Now they might have two really good number ones. Maybe not as great, obviously, as Ekblad and Weegar together, but I think combined as a top four, it's better with Sherratt. And I won't be surprised to see them at least try it. If you're Andrew Brunette down the stretch here, I think there's going to be some games you'll see them split those two up just to see how it looks.
I just think stylistically, for what the price paid was, it wouldn't have been that much more to just get Lindholm instead. I like Sherratt, but I think he got the bump from playing with Shea Weber last year and not the other way around.
Okay.
And I think Lindholm is a better skater, better defender. Like Lindholm does everything well. There's not really one area of the game that he doesn't, isn't successful in. He doesn't necessarily have the huge offensive punch, but Sherratt has next to none. So there's nothing lost there. And I think the difference is you would have had to probably, in addition to, or instead of the player that you sent to Montreal and Ty Smilanic, who Kent Hughes would have seen play up close a lot because he played in the same league as his son this year, that's the deal you would have had to include the first and Samoskevich probably. So that's essentially two first. Anaheim's looking for a grade A top prospect in return for Lindholm, in addition to the first, plus another pick to probably make the money work. So it's a tall ask for Lindholm, both rentals. I just think stylistically he's a better fit. If you're looking for brawn and tough, like they already have that a bit in Radko Gudas. You limit his minutes, 12, 14, 16 minutes a night, and you throw Lindholm out there, your two pairs can skate forever.
Yeah. Yeah, Sherratt can play a ton. I wonder though the reason why they make this trade. I think Bill Zito's shown us in the past. I think I won't be surprised if Ben Sherratt re-signs in Florida, and so that's what makes it. It's not.
That's what he did with Brandon Montour last year,
right? And Sam Bennett, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now it wasn't a UFA, but I could see that happening. So it becomes
they need to move money. I think an easy guy to move would be like a Hornquist in the 100%.
Summer. Yeah. So that's where I think this trade is one that's not just going to be a rental. I could be wrong, but I had two people text me. They thought that Ben Sherratt, the reason they were willing to pay that much is because they believe they're going to re-sign him.
Makes sense.
So Tampa Bay, Frank, we've seen Tampa, they've made big moves and it's really helped them. They've still got some assets. That's the thing about Tampa, man. I'll give them credit. Like, they've won 2 cups and, Florida's won none, and Florida doesn't have first rounders, and Tampa Bay still got some picks. So I don't know if you can ever rule out them, but we haven't heard anything from them, which is maybe par for the course. So I have zero expectations on what Tampa's going to do. I don't know if it'll be a major splash, but I'll say this. I think Tampa does something.
You said zero expectations. That's because Tampa has $0. Like quite literally, they've used every portion of their LTIR available, like to the penny. That's how good they are at managing their cap. My guess is if they're going to trade for someone it's probably on defense. That's been their playbook, is sort of the depth guy. I wonder if Justin Braun is a fit there.
Potentially. But they'd have to move something out, right?
Well, yeah, Braun's only at 1.6 to have the Flyers eat half and squeeze in $800,000. Like all they have to do is send someone down.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah.
But they don't have anyone that's waiver exempt. And that's one of their big sticking points is they can make room by trading Boris Kachuk or Taylor Radish or someone else. They actually need those guys who are signed for the next 2 years to be contributing at really cheap cap hits. So that's part of their predicament, is they don't want to give up the pieces on their team to make room because they know they need guys in that price range and they're comfortable with them and they're young and they're cheap.
Yeah. Yeah. Like I think Tampa Bay, compared to previous deadlines, they're not going to be big mover, but I agree with you, Frank. I think depth defenseman is written all over the Tampa Bay Lightning. Now, the Toronto Maple Leafs, maybe their goaltending woes have been solved internally. They could be hoping that. And they also, I like Jack Campbell when he gets back healthy. I still think they're fairly high in him. So I'm not sure that the goaltending is where they're going to look. I really think Toronto needs a defenseman.
I think that's where they're at.
Yeah, like that to me, I would argue that would be a bigger requirement for them than goaltending.
Yeah, and I think that's how they're thinking at the moment too. What they're doing is, I believe the guy they've honed in on is Mark Giordano, and I think to their benefit, my understanding is that Giordano, if all things are equal, his preference is to go home and play for the Maple Leafs. That's where he's from. That's what he'd like to do. Pretty built-in chemistry there with TJ Brody, if that's a possibility as well. They've played together for so long. The question is the price. The Leafs aren't going to be trading their first-round pick for Mark Giordano. That's what the Kraken want. I would say they're also keeping a close eye on Lindholm and what the price ends up being. I still think it's too rich for them with what they'd like to spend for a rental. But ideally, I think they know he's the best defenseman available. So they're keeping tabs on it. But what I think they're really hoping for is that come 1:00 on Monday or Sunday night, that a first-round pick hasn't materialized for Giordano. And if all things are equal, I think the Kraken, and they're only going to get a second from somewhere, that they want to try and fulfill Giordano's wishes to go where he wants.
Yeah,
obviously, if there's a better deal out there, they'll take that. I think Boston has been in the mix. I think St. Louis has been there. But Giordano is a guy that I believe the Leafs have really focused on.
Well, I was going to say, Frank, because I know that teams are looking at what Ben Sherratt got, and they're going to say, hey, Ben Sherratt got this. Our guy, respectively, has got to get something similar. But other people say, well, geez, look at how much Florida gave up. So maybe that's an outlier. And that's the game of cat and mouse that's going to be played here in the next 72 hours. The thing about Lindholm that intrigues me to Toronto, Frank, is if you could acquire Lindholm, then you could move one of your forwards, not now, but in the offseason to create space to re-sign Lindholm. Right. So it could
and you
be.
also don't know what's going to happen with Muzzin. Like,
Yes.
if Muzzin has some significant issues and God forbid couldn't play next year, there's your cap space right there. I'm never concerned about, and I don't think the Leafs or really any other team should be concerned about the cap space to keep that player. You can always move someone. Let's say you get the guy that's the rental and you love him and you can't let him walk. You'll find a way. You worry about that later. You get the guy and you plug him into your team if you believe he's the best fit and you go on your run. I just think the daunting thing for the Leafs is what we've talked about a lot, which is the teams they have to go through to get to where they want to get to. It's looking like Tampa in the first round, which is not going to be easy. And then even if they get through that, it's looking like Florida in the second round. That's a lot to then begin moving your pieces, which is why they don't want to trade their first. And the other guy they really don't want to trade is Matt Nyes.
Yeah. So I think they got to get a defenseman. And I know there was all the talk earlier about goaltending, but I think ultimately Toronto's not going to get a goalie. I think they're going to.
They're monitoring it though. They're like, if the price is right, they will make a trade for a goalie.
Yeah. Who though? That's the thing. Like,
well, I think everyone wants to know what happens with Fleury.
Yeah. Well, he's the
one.
Does
the price come down to a second? And if it's a second, well, then that's a different conversation.
Yeah. No, that's fair. The Boston Bruins, who have sneakily played quite well here, Frank, for a stretch. Like they got their guys healthy again. They put Pasternak with Hall. They kept Bergeron with Marchand, and that's really seemed to spark that group. They need a defenseman though in Boston.
Left shot defenseman. Lots of talk about Jacob Chychrun. That's been going on forever. I think as part of the package back, the Coyotes asked for Jeremy Swayman in net. They're looking for a goalie. I don't know that Chychrun gets moved. I think it's still a little bit of a long shot. I'd say it's not even 50-50 that he gets traded. The one name the Bruins have eyed in the last week is Calvin DeHaan. They're checking in on Lindholm and one of the teams that's really interested, and I think they could make a play to re-sign him as well. Any of the left shot guys that are out there, I think they've probably looked at.
What about Jake DeBrusk?
I don't see it. I don't think they can get equal value, and they're not going to make their team worse. He's a restricted free agent. There's no real pressure to trade him. You could still get something as good or better for him in the summer.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And they're playing really well, right? Like, and DeBrusk is being productive on that line too. So that's the thing.
He's gone the last 5 games again without a point, but he did have that stretch where he had 8 goals in 8 games.
Yeah. So, well, yeah, if you look at it, right, like I don't expect him to be 8-8 and I don't expect him to be 0-5. You kind of take the points over that 13 game stretch and say, hey, that's pretty good. I saw the Detroit Red Wings. Now that's a tough loss for the Vancouver Canucks last night. And Bruce Boudreau didn't mince his words. Felt like that was their worst first period that they played since he's been the head coach. They lose. Detroit wins 1-0. You have Tyler Bertuzzi's name at your board, and he's got term and everything. He can't go into Canada, so maybe that plays a small factor, more so in the West than the East, because the only Canadian team in the playoffs is going to be Toronto. Does Bertuzzi seem like more of an off-season trade ultimately, though, for you?
I don't think so. There's something up there. I don't know exactly what it is or what's the proper way to frame it, but the Red Wings have let everyone know they're open for business, and I think Bertuzzi has let them know that he's open to moving on. I don't think it's a trade request or anything, but I do think that he would be a guy that's okay with a trade. I I mentioned one of the things earlier this week when we first put him out there is, a team lovingly referred to him as incredibly annoying, the lesser skilled version of Brad Marchand. He's had an unreal season.
Yes.
Really good player that I could see being on the move by Monday.
The thing about Detroit is like their head coach has been there a long time and they haven't won. And I know he signed his extension last summer, Frank, but I think it's hard enough to have a coach in your ear when you're winning. Having the same coach all the time and you're losing. Like I looked at Detroit's record as the season's gone on this year, Frank, they've gotten worse. They're not getting like, how you like Buffalo is a team that's getting better. They had a tough start. Now, sure, they're healthier. Montreal, another team that was terrible. They're getting better. Detroit's going the opposite way. I wonder, how much of, the discourse in Detroit is just, it happens to winning coaches where you get tired of the guy. I got to think that's coming a factor on a losing coach.
Maybe. He signed an extension in 2021, so I don't foresee anything happening there right now. I think the other guy to keep an eye on is Nick Leddy. I wonder about the Dallas Stars. They held him out on Thursday night to protect the asset. You saw the Stars are moving money. They put Andre Sekera on waivers and they're creating cap flexibility. I think Leddy, with his experience, with the Jim Nill connection in Detroit, with the asset cost, I think Nick Leddy would be a good fit in Dallas.
There's been lots of talk about Lindholm, and rightfully so, Frank. But I think, look at the Islanders. The Islanders desperately miss Leddy and Taves hugely. I think that's hurt them a lot. And I think Nick Leddy's a solid player. They've been to a conference final the last 2 years, so they coaches like the playoff experience factor. Nick Leddy's name, and I think you have him. Was it 6th on your most recent one?
Yeah, he's 9.
Oh, 9th. Okay, so all the other talk about D-Man, I think that's the guy that could be a really good fit for a team. I like him a lot and what he brings.
I agree. He's kind of flown under the radar, probably because he plays in Detroit. He's got plenty of playoff experience. How many times has he been to the conference final? 4.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I think he's a guy that is 2nd round pick all day.
Oh, yeah, if Toronto was looking at D-Man, he should be in their radar too, I would think. The Buffalo Sabres, Colin Miller seems like maybe the obvious name. He finally got back in the lineup last night for them, so he'll have a few games. He's a right shot defenseman. There's not a ton of them available. Frank, he would seem like the obvious guy who's going to get moved, and probably not at a big return, mid-round pick.
Yeah, they're probably a 3rd. They're looking for. Because they know he's a right shot guy, they think they can get that. And I don't think that's unreasonable. He has been hurt for a bit. As you mentioned, came back, played 17 and a half minutes against the Oilers on Thursday, had an assist. It's not all that long ago that he had a 40+ point season for the Vegas Golden Knights, was part of their deep playoff run. He's actively, I think, excited about the idea of a trade because he'd like to show himself before getting to the market this summer in a contract year, and extremely motivated to come in and play well.
And, they got Haig and they got Pysyk. I got 3 defensemen who I think are all available if you want to get them. And the cost is going to be minimal. Yeah,
it's not going to be super expensive. And if you're looking for bargain D, the Buffalo Sabres are your team.
Yeah, 100%.
Victor Olofsson on the board as well. Still think that trade is a bit unlikely at this point, but I know they don't or really aren't wild about paying him 4 or 4.25 in an ARB deal this summer.
We get to the Ottawa Senators and Nick Paul. I've stated it many times, and you reported they made another offer for him. I really think Ottawa needs to keep him. And even if you end up having to pay Frank, let's say that, and I'm just using this for an argument. Let's say the number is $3 million. That you think, hey, we'll pay. You might have to pay.
That's the number. That's what their ask is. They want $3 million.
Yeah, and so I'm just using that as a round number. But if you have to go up to 3.25 to make it happen, I think that's a player I would do it on. I think Nick Paul. When I look at the construction of their forward group, and a lot of the young players, Nick Paul has finally figured out how to play in the NHL. He's a solid 2-way player. You can put him in tougher situations, more defensive zone starts. You don't have to overburden then like your more skilled offensive guys and Norris and Stutzel and Formanton and Kachuk and those guys. I really think Ottawa sign him. And even as long as you don't have to go like too high, but if $3 million is the ask and you end up at 2.9 or 3 million, I think that's a fair contract. I really do.
4 years times 3 million would get it done, I think.
Yeah. Like I don't think that's an outrageous contract at all.
No, that brings him to age 30 and they don't have any cap issues. That's the thing is like, there's no reason to not, because like you said, they're going to go chase to get the next Nick Paul and they don't really need picks. First off, they've got 6 in the first 3 rounds this year upcoming, and they already have enough guys in their system that they already know that all of these guys can't possibly fit on the roster at once. Getting more picks for Nick Paul right now doesn't really help you. I'm just not convinced that they see it that way in terms of paying that price. They haven't to this point, unless they're just playing hardball and are eventually going to buckle. They've been playing the whole like loyalty card, I think, in terms of, well, Nick Paul would want to be here. And it's like, well, he's not going to give up money to do it on a team that still has hurdles to jump to be a playoff team.
And here's the thing. You have the exact same GM and ownership who paid Chris Tierney $3.5 million. Nick Paul, I think right now is a better player than what Tierney was, and you were willing to pay him 3.5. You traded him in the Carlson deal. So you acquired him, excuse me. You didn't draft and develop him like Paul. Like to me, and he's a UFA. So you can take Nick Paul's raise. He's 1.3. You go to 3. You're still saving 500 in Tierney. Like this seems like such a no-brainer to me. I honestly, I don't. Maybe there's something I'm missing.
I don't think so. I just think the Sens mind their dollars and cents.
Yeah, but they didn't on Tierney, so that's that. Like it seems like an odd one.
Anton Forsberg.
Well, there's a goalie. Yeah, there's a goalie you could probably move. But if you're Ottawa, Frank, I'll ask again the question: if you have questions about Matt Murray,
well, they do. How could you not?
Yeah. So wouldn't you keep Forsberg? Because then you're going to spend the offseason trying to find a goalie.
Yeah, but Forsberg turns 30 next year.
That's not old for
no, it's not. But I think there's some value. I think the problem with as well as Forsberg has played, a winning record on the 29th place team and a .916 save percentage this year, Mike McKenna said this on our Daily Faceoff show on Thursday. He goes, it all comes down to name value and recognition and reputation, unfortunately, that he's thinking that Forsberg may arguably be, one of the better goalies available that just isn't getting the same traction on the trade market. And at that point, to your point, you might as well keep him, or they might keep him.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think
Michael Del Zotto as well, another depth defenseman.
Yeah.
Well, he's north of a point per game in the AHL, and he hasn't played in the NHL since November, since US Thanksgiving, and there's only 4 guys on the Sens defense core that have more points than he put up in 10 games, 6. It's actually cheaper for the Sens to retain half with him having 1 more year than it is for them to buy him out. They'd save $500,000 in real dollars. Pretty easy depth pickup for a guy that can still actually move pretty well. They gave him a 2-year, $4 million deal in the offseason and played him 10 games before burying him in Belleville.
Yeah.
10 goals in 26 AHL games, 27 points in 26 AHL games. There's not even an ask, like a big ask to get him. Essentially, you just, the Sens need to retain a bit and that's it.
Yeah, at this time, there's very few teams, though, that need offensive defensemen, right? Like, I wonder, he doesn't really fit the defensive defenseman mold that teams like to add.
No, but if all you have to do is take on a hit that you can bury in the minors anyway for right now, isn't he the perfect black ace as your 7th left shot D that could just step in if you need him to? There's no, I'm saying there's literally no cost.
Yeah.
They're not fair. Asking, you're not trading a pick to get him.
No. So it's going to be for futures.
That's my guess. Something like it's something in that neighborhood.
Okay. An interesting one to watch. Arturi Lehkonen, Frank, as we end in the East, the Montreal Canadiens. He was really high on your board. I've seen him drop down a little bit. Is that Montreal's rethinking it? Maybe they're looking at signing him, or the trade offers have slowed down. What's with the drop for Lehkonen?
No, I think there's been a steady flow of interest in Arturi Lehkonen, but the price is really high. It's first round pick plus a top prospect. And it's the same as the Brandon Hagel world. Teams view him as a perfect. He was on our list of top 5 players who could be this year's Barclay Goodrow or Blake Coleman. He's relentless defensively. The defensive end is his, the way I view trade deadline as my Super Bowl, that's how he plays in the defensive end. Like every puck matters, every inch matters. And it's come often at the cost of offense, but under Marty St. Louis, he's back to scoring again. He went a 6-game stretch with 6 goals and has been one of the hotter players in the league. The ask is high because the Canadiens value him, and they're certainly willing to re-sign him and have that conversation in the summer. I think he's a guy that helps you win. I think he's a perfect fit on a playoff team and at an inexpensive cap hit for this season, pending restricted free agent, has a lot of value, team control. Does he get moved? I still think it's less likely than likely, but there has always been a lot of interest in Lehkonen. Nothing new today.
The one team, Frank, that makes a lot of sense for everything you say, the Los Angeles Kings.